Every day, Kelechi had to pretend. She had to act like she didn't see the ghosts that walked past her. This wasn't something she chose. She was born with it. Some people might call it a gift, but for Kelechi, it felt like a curse. Seeing ghosts scared her. It was something she couldn't stop, no matter how hard she tried. Kelechi managed to live with this strange ability. She stayed quiet about it and tried her best to ignore the ghosts. But everything changed when her best friend, Kamsi, was about to marry a ghost. This ghost wasn't a kind one. It was a wicked spirit, and Kelechi knew it. She couldn't ignore this. Kelechi's life had always been strange, even from the day she was born. When she was born, she cried. That was normal. But she didn't stop crying. She cried all night. The nurses told her parents that something was wrong. This is not normal, they said. Her mother and father were very worried. They loved their baby girl, but they didn't understand why she was crying so much. They took her home, hoping she would calm down. But that night, Kelechi cried even louder. She didn't stop, not even for a moment. Her parents didn't know what to do. They thought maybe she was sick. The next day, they rushed her to the hospital. The doctors checked her. They said, "Your baby is fine. She's healthy." But her parents didn't believe it. How could a healthy baby cry so much? They tried everything. They visited other doctors, even traditional healers. Everyone said the same thing, "Your baby is normal." But Kelechi didn't seem normal. She cried every day, all day. She would only stop crying to eat or sleep. Then, she'd start crying again. Her parents were tired and confused. They wanted to help their baby, but they didn't know how. This was how Kelechi's early life went. Cry, eat, sleep, and cry again. Her parents wondered if this was a sign that their daughter was different. But they had no idea just how different Kelechi really was. By the time Kelechi turned 7, her parents noticed something strange. They would walk into her room and find her talking to the air. When they asked, "Who are you talking to?" she would smile and say, "My friend." At first, they thought it was just an imaginary friend, but her behavior became harder to explain. Sometimes, they would find her laughing, her eyes fixed on an empty corner of the room. Other times, she would be crying, hugging herself tightly. When they asked why she was upset, Kelechi would only say, "My friend is sad." Her parents grew worried. They decided to take her to a psychiatric hospital. The doctor spent hours with Kelechi, asking her many questions. When she spoke to her parents, she said, "Your daughter is perfectly normal. She has a vivid imagination." But her parents weren't convinced. What they saw in their daughter felt far from normal. Kelechi was different. She loved watching horror movies. While other children screamed at the sight of ghosts, Kelechi leaned forward, fascinated. One day, during a movie night, she pointed at the screen and said, "I've seen that ghost before." Her parents froze, unsure of what to say. They laughed nervously and told her to stop joking. Kelechi spent most of her time indoors, avoiding other children. She didn't need anyone else because she had her friend. She gave her friend a name, Aylander. "If I had a sister, that's what I'd call her," Kelechi said with a smile. Aylander smiled at her, saying, "That's so sweet." To Kelechi, she wasn't just a friend, she was family. Every time they saw Kelechi smiling at the air or crying into her hands, they wondered, what was their daughter really seeing? Kelechi's parents grew more concerned as time went on. They didn't like that their daughter spent all her time alone, talking to her invisible friend. She rarely went outside and didn't play with the other children in the neighborhood. Her parents decided they needed to do something. They hoped that making friends with someone her age might change her. Their solution was Kamsi, the neighbor's child. Kamsi was a cheerful, lively girl who always seemed full of energy. She was the complete opposite of Kelechi, who preferred the quiet comfort of her room. Kamsi's parents agreed to let her visit Kelechi every day after school, hoping their daughter could bring Kelechi out of her shell. When Kamsi first showed up at Kelechi's house, Kelechi wasn't happy. She didn't want to play with anyone. She didn't understand why her parents thought this was a good idea. "I don't need friends," she told her mother. Her mother sighed. "Kelechi, you need real friends. Give Kamsi a chance." Reluctantly, Kelechi agreed to spend time with Kamsi. At first, their playdates were awkward. Kelechi barely spoke, and Kamsi did all the talking. "Let's play hide and seek," Kamsi would say, but Kelechi would shake her head. "How about we draw pictures?" Kamsi would suggest, but Kelechi wasn't interested. For days, this continued. Kamsi didn't give up, but Kelechi didn't make it easy for her. Then, one afternoon, something changed. They were sitting in Kelechi's room when Kamsi started telling a story. It was about a princess who could talk to animals and had a magical garden. Kelechi listened quietly at first, but as the story went on, she began to ask questions. "What happened to the princess?" she asked. "Did she save the garden?" Kamsi smiled. "She did. But only because she trusted her magic." For the first time, Kelechi smiled back. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, Kelechi and Kamsi began to bond. Kelechi found herself laughing at Kamsi's silly jokes and looking forward to her visits. They played games, shared stories, and even created secret handshakes. Kelechi's parents were overjoyed to see their daughter opening up. For the first time in years, they felt like things might be okay. But while Kelechi's parents saw a normal friendship forming, Kelechi saw something else. From the very first time she met Kamsi, she noticed that there was something unusual about her. Kelechi had always been able to see things others couldn't. She saw ghosts, shadows, and strange energies that surrounded certain people. And Kamsi was no exception. The first thing Kelechi noticed was Kamsi's heart, or rather, the lack of it. Where there should have been a heartbeat, there was only a glowing golden light. It shone brightly, almost blinding Kelechi the first time she saw it. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. But no matter how many times she looked, it was always there, a soft, pulsing glow in Kamsi's chest. Kelechi didn't understand what it meant. She had seen many strange things in her life, but this was new. She didn't know why Kamsi's heart was like this or what it meant for her. Kelechi decided to keep it to herself. Neither Kamsi nor her parents seemed to know about the golden light, and Kelechi didn't want to scare anyone. She didn't want to ruin the friendship that was just starting to bloom. So, she said nothing. As the days turned into weeks, Kelechi and Kamsi grew closer. Her closest ghost friend, Ailander, had warned her. "Don't tell Kamsi about me," Ailander said one day. Kelechi didn't like keeping things from Kamsi, but Ailander was firm. "If she knows, everything will change." Kelechi argued at first. Kamsi was her best friend. They told each other everything. But after a long talk, Kelechi gave in. She promised to keep quiet. Years went by. Kelechi and Kamsi stayed close. They shared secrets, laughter, and tears. By the time they were 21, they had grown into beautiful young women. Kelechi, with her quiet and mysterious air, and Kamsi, with her loud and cheerful personality, made the perfect pair. To anyone who saw them, they looked like two normal friends. But Kelechi's life was far from normal. One evening, while sitting on her bed, Kelechi finally asked Ailander something she had been wondering about for years. "Why are you still here? Shouldn't you be in the spirit world?" Ailander's smile faded. She looked sad, her usual glow dimming. "I can't leave," she said softly. "I wasn't buried. After the accident, no one came for my body. I was just left there." Kelechi's heart sank. "What do you mean, no one came for you?" "I was an orphan," Ailander replied. "There was no one to bury me, no one to mourn me. I've been stuck here ever since. Kelechi didn't know what to say. She felt a mix of sadness and anger. I'll help you, she said finally. We'll find your body, and we'll make sure you're buried properly. Aylander's eyes lit up with hope. Do you mean that? Kelechi nodded. You've been there for me all these years. It's time I help you. Seeing ghosts wasn't easy for Kelechi. It wasn't just Aylander. Everywhere she went, she saw them. They were in the streets, in the market, even in her house. Some looked like normal people, but others were terrifying, pale, hollow-eyed, and twisted in ways that made her stomach turn. She couldn't talk to them, couldn't even look at them for too long. If she did, they might notice her. And if they noticed her, who knew what they might do? The market was the worst place. It was always crowded with both the living and the dead. Kelechi pretends like she couldn't see the spirits. One afternoon, Kelechi and Kamsi were walking through the market. The air was thick with the smell of spices, roasted corn, and fresh fish. Kelechi tried her best to focus on Kamsi's chatter, but she couldn't stop glancing at the faces around them. She knew many of the market's vendors weren't alive, and being surrounded by them always made her uneasy. As they passed by a stall selling ripe mangoes, a tall, handsome guy walked up to them. His name was Chibuzer, and he was the talk of the neighborhood. Every girl liked him. No one could resist his charm, and he knew it. His smile was bright, his confidence unshakable, and the way he carried himself made people turn their heads. Chibuzer stopped right in front of Kamsi. Hey, beautiful, he said, flashing his perfect smile. Where have you been hiding all my life? Kelechi froze. Her eyes widened as she realized the truth. Chibuzer wasn't alive. His eyes, though charming to others, looked hollow to her. She could see his true form, a spirit. No, please. She's not interested, Kelechi said quickly, her voice firm. Chibuzer raised an eyebrow and smirked. I wasn't talking to you, he said smoothly. Before Kamsi could respond, Kelechi stepped in front of her. She's my friend, Kelechi said sharply. And I can decide for her. Kamsi stared at Kelechi, confused. What's wrong with you? Calm down, she said. She turned to Chibuzer, a shy smile on her face. I think he's kinda cute, she whispered. Kelechi's heart sank. She wanted to scream, he's a ghost. Stay away from him. But she couldn't. Kamsi didn't know about her ability to see ghosts, and Kelechi wasn't ready to tell her. Instead, she grabbed Kamsi's arm. Trust me. He's not the right guy for you, she said. Kamsi pulled her arm away. Why are you acting like this? She asked, annoyed. Are you jealous or something? Kelechi shook her head, trying to stay calm. I just don't think he's a good person, she said. It was the best excuse she could come up with. Chibuzer smiled. Don't worry, he said to Kamsi, ignoring Kelechi. I'll see you around. With that, he winked and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Kamsi turned to Kelechi, her frustration clear. Why did you do that? He seemed nice. Kelechi sighed, trying to find the right words. You don't know him like I do, she said. Just trust me on this. But Kamsi didn't trust her. She crossed her arms and gave Kelechi a sharp look. You're just jealous, she said. You don't want me to have someone because you're always alone. Kelechi's chest tightened. She wanted to yell the truth, that she was protecting Kamsi from something dangerous. But how could she explain that without revealing her secret? How could she make Kamsi understand that Chibuzer wasn't just bad news, he was something much worse? Instead of arguing, Kelechi stayed quiet. She let Kamsi walk ahead of her, chatting away about how cute Chibuzer was and how she hoped to see him again. Kelechi followed silently, her mind racing. She had a bad feeling about this. She knew Chibuzer wasn't what he seemed. As they left the market and headed home, Kelechi couldn't shake the image of Chibuzer's terrifying form. He might have fooled Kamsi, but not her. She had seen too much to be tricked by a charming smile. Whatever Chibuzur wanted, it wasn't good, and Kelechi was determined to stop him, even if Kamsi didn't believe her. Chibuzur was not what he seemed. Behind his charming smile and smooth words was a darkness so old and powerful that it could bring destruction to everything. Long ago, the world faced creatures like him, demonic spirits that thrived on chaos and despair. These spirits roamed freely, leaving destruction in their wake. They were nearly unstoppable, feared by all who encountered them. But then came the ancient warriors. These brave men and women stood up against the spirits, wielding sacred knowledge and tools that could trap the demons in a realm far from the living world. The battle was long and brutal, but in the end, the warriors succeeded. Most of the spirits were sealed away, and the world knew peace again. The warriors then hid the keys to this spirit realm, knowing that if the seals were ever broken, the spirits would return angrier, stronger, and more dangerous than before. But not all the spirits were trapped. One escaped the warrior's grasp, possessed a freshly dead body, and called himself Chibuzur. He was cunning and careful, knowing that survival required patience. While his brothers and sisters were imprisoned, Chibuzur remained in the human world, hidden but watching. For centuries, he waited, gathering knowledge about the living and planning his revenge. His goal was simple: search for who was holding the key, free the others, and bring an end to the kingdom. For years, Chibuzur searched for the keys to the spirit realm. He scoured every corner of the earth, following every lead. But the keys were not physical objects. They were hidden in unexpected places, bound to pure energy. And finally, after all his searching, Chibuzur had found what he was looking for. The key wasn't a relic or an artifact. It was Kamsi. The glowing golden light in Kamsi's chest wasn't just strange, it was the key. The energy inside her heart held the power to break the seal and free the trapped spirits. Chibuzur realized this the moment he saw her. The light called to him, a beacon of power he couldn't ignore. It was everything he had been searching for. But there was a problem. The energy in Kamsi's heart couldn't be taken by force. It was tied to her emotions, to her love. The only way to unlock the power was for Kamsi to open her heart fully to him, to fall deeply, truly in love with him. Only then could he claim the key. Chibuzur didn't care about Kamsi. Her laugh, her dreams, her kindness, they meant nothing to him. To him, she was just a tool. A means to an end. If he had to lie to her, charm her, and pretend to love her to get what he wanted, he would. And if taking the key meant destroying her, he wouldn't hesitate. If Chibuzur took the key, Kamsi would not survive because it was her heart. Chibuzur's mind raced with possibilities. The ancient warriors were long gone, and the knowledge they had used to defeat the spirits had been lost to time. The humans of today wouldn't stand a chance. And the spirits wouldn't just return as they were before. They would come back stronger, 10 times more powerful, fueled by centuries of anger and hatred. But for now, Chibuzur had to focus on Kamsi. He had to win her over, make her trust him, and plant seeds of affection in her heart. He would be the perfect man, charming, kind, and attentive. He would make her believe that he cared, that he loved her. And when the time came, he would take what he wanted. There was only one obstacle: Kelechi. From the moment he met her, Chibuzur knew Kelechi wasn't like the others. There was something about her, an awareness, a quiet strength, that made him uneasy. She didn't fall for his charm, didn't laugh at his jokes. She saw through him in a way no one else had. Kelechi's suspicious eyes had followed his every move, and he could feel her unease. But Chibuzur wasn't worried. He had dealt with obstacles before. Kelechi might be cautious, but she wouldn't stop him. No one would. That night, as the moon hung low in the sky, Chibuzur stood in the shadows, his mind alive with plans. He could feel the whispers of the spirits from the other realm, their voices faint but insistent. They were waiting for him, urging him on. They needed him to succeed. "I won't fail," Chibuzur said aloud, his voice cold and steady. The key will be mine. He thought of Kamsi, her bright smile and her innocent laugh. She had no idea what loving him would cost her. She didn't know that her heart was both her greatest gift and her greatest danger. Chibuzur didn't give up. Day after day, he returned to Kamsi, his charm turned up to full power. He always seemed to appear at the perfect moment, flashing his dazzling smile and saying all the right things. "You look even more beautiful today," he would say, or, "I was thinking about you all night." His words were smooth, and his confidence was unshakable. Kamsi couldn't help but feel flattered. She had never met anyone like him before, so bold, so charming, so attentive. Yet, deep down, something held her back. Every time she started to feel her heart soften, she would hear Kelechi's warnings echoing in her mind. "Kamsi, he's not good for you," Kelechi said for what felt like the 100th time. Her voice was firm, but her eyes were filled with concern. "You don't know who he really is." Kamsi frowned, frustrated. "Why do you keep saying that, Kelechi? What has he done to you?" "It's not about me," Kelechi replied. "I'm telling you, there's something off about him. Please, just be careful." Kamsi shook her head, annoyed. "You're jealous. Admit it, Kelechi. You don't want me to be happy because you're always alone." Kelechi's heart ached at those words, but she didn't show it. She couldn't tell Kamsi the truth, that Chibuzur wasn't human, that he was a ghost. "I just want to protect you," Kelechi said softly. "You're my best friend." "Well, it doesn't feel like it," Kamsi snapped. "I'm old enough to make my own decisions. Stop trying to control me." Chibuzur knew Kelechi was a problem. Her constant interference was keeping Kamsi from fully trusting him. He could see it in Kamsi's eyes, the hesitation, the doubt. She wanted to fall for him, but Kelechi's words kept pulling her back. Still, Chibuzur was patient. He had waited centuries to find the key. He could wait a little longer. Each day, he found new ways to win Kamsi over. He would bring her small gifts, a flower, a bracelet, even her favorite snacks. He listened to her talk about her dreams, laughed at her jokes, and made her feel like the most important person in the world. He played his part perfectly, and little by little, he could feel her walls starting to crack. But Kelechi wasn't giving up either. She watched Chibuzur's every move, her eyes sharp and suspicious. Whenever he got too close to Kamsi, she found a way to interrupt. "Kamsi, we're going to be late," she would say. She couldn't let him get too comfortable. She was trying so hard to protect Kamsi, but it wouldn't matter in the end. Chibuzur was confident that he would win. He always did. "She can't stop me," he muttered to himself. "No one can." The next day, Chibuzur showed up at Kamsi's house unannounced. He brought her flower with a sweet smile on his face. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," he said. Kamsi blushed, her frustration with Kelechi fading for a moment. "You're too much," she said with a laugh, taking the flowers. "Not enough for you," he replied smoothly. "You deserve the world." Kelechi, watching from a distance, felt a wave of dread. She could see the light in Kamsi's chest flickering, responding to Chibuzur's words. It was subtle, but it was there. Chibuzur was getting closer to his goal, and Kelechi didn't know how much longer she could hold him back. That night, as Kamsi lay in bed, she thought about Chibuzur. His words played over and over in her mind, and for the first time, she wondered if Kelechi was wrong. Could it be possible that Chibuzur really cared about her? Kelechi stayed up late, staring at the ceiling and trying to think of a way to protect Kamsi. She knew the danger was growing, and she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Kamsi, however, was growing tired of Kelechi's meddling. "Why can't you just let me be happy?" she asked one evening after Chibuzur had left. "He's a good guy, Kelechi. Why can't you see that?" "He's not who you think he is," Kelechi replied, her voice trembling. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell Kamsi everything. But she knew she couldn't. Not yet. Then who is he, huh? Kamsi demanded. What do you know about him that I don't? Kelechi hesitated. I can't explain it, she said finally. But you have to trust me. One quiet afternoon, Kelechi was sitting in her room, staring out the window, lost in thought. She had been feeling uneasy lately. Kamsi had been acting distant. Before she could delve deeper into her worries, a sudden, loud bang on her door startled her. She rushed to open it and found Kamsi standing there, smiling brightly. In her hand was a small, fancy-looking envelope. I came to invite you to my wedding, Kamsi said with excitement, giving the envelope to Kelechi. Kelechi froze. Her heart sank. What? She whispered, her voice barely loud enough to hear. I'm getting married to Chibuzor. Kamsi said happily. It's happening in 2 days. 2 days? Kelechi repeated, her voice shaking. She couldn't believe it. How could Kamsi plan such a big thing and not tell her best friend? Kamsi grinned. I wanted to surprise you, she said. You'll come, right? Kelechi nodded weakly, unable to find the right words. After Kamsi left, she closed the door and leaned against it. Her mind was spinning. Her stomach felt sick as she thought about Chibuzor. What did he want from Kamsi? Why was the wedding so rushed? That night, as the house became quiet, Aylander appeared. Kelechi quickly explained everything about Chibuzor, the wedding, how little time there was, and her growing fears. Aylander listened quietly, her face dark with worry. I understand now why he's in such a hurry, Aylander said. He's close to getting what he wants. What does he want from her? Kelechi asked, though deep down, she already knew it was something terrible. The light in Kamsi's chest is the key, Aylander explained. It's what he's been looking for all this time. If he takes it, she'll die. Kelechi's heart felt like it stopped. But Kamsi hasn't fully opened her heart to him yet, she said quickly. You told me that's the only way he can take it. She hasn't yet, Aylander agreed. But she's close. She loves him. The only reason she hasn't given him her whole heart is because you've made her doubt him a little. That doubt is the only thing keeping her alive. Kelechi let out a shaky breath. So if that doubt goes away, she's gone, Aylander finished. The room felt colder. Kelechi's hands shook as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. Then Aylander spoke again, even more seriously. There's something else you need to know, Aylander said. If she kisses him willingly after they have been wedded, even just once, he will still take her heart. She doesn't need to be completely in love with him for that. A kiss of the married couple is enough. Kelechi froze. A kiss, she said softly. Her mind immediately thought of the wedding. Weddings always ended with a kiss. It was sure to happen. She grabbed the wedding invitation and checked the date again. 2 days, she said aloud. That's not enough time. How could she prepare for a wedding and not tell me? This wasn't her plan, Aylander said. It was Chibuzor's idea. He wanted to keep you out of the way because he knew you were making her doubt him. Kelechi clenched her fists. How do I stop him? She asked desperately. There has to be a way. There is, Aylander said, but it won't be easy. The only way to stop him is to show his real self to Kamsi. His real self? Kelechi repeated. How am I supposed to do that? You'll have to figure it out, Aylander said. If she sees who he really is, the heart will send Chibuzor to where the others were trapped. Kelechi felt overwhelmed. How can I do that in just 2 days? She asked, her voice breaking. I don't even know where to begin. Aylander placed a ghostly hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you think, she said. You'll find a way. You always do. That night, Kelechi couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had 2 days to save Kamsi. 2 days to stop a wedding that could take her best friend's life. She felt lost and hopeless, with too many questions and no answers. Just then an idea struck her mind. I know what I have to do, she whispered to herself. The night before the wedding had arrived. Everything seemed normal. The house was buzzing with excitement, music played softly, decorations were being finalized, and Kamsi glowed with happiness. Kelechi had thought about her plan all day, clinging to the one tool she believed could work, a mirror. It was said that mirrors could reflect a person's true self, showing what lies beneath the surface. If the mirror worked as she hoped, it would expose Chibuzor for what he really was, a demon, not a man. With trembling hands, Kelechi grabbed the mirror and left for Kamsi's house. As soon as Kelechi stepped through the door, Kamsi welcomed her with open arms. I'm so glad you came, Kamsi said, her smile bright. But then her tone grew serious. Please, Kelechi, don't ruin my day. I just want everything to go perfectly. Kelechi forced a small smile. I won't ruin anything, she said. I just want to show you something. What is it? Kamsi asked, her voice soft but wary. She walked inside. Kelechi pulled out the mirror, her heart pounding. Just look into this mirror, she said. It's supposed to show the truth. Kamsi frowned, confused but curious. She glanced at the mirror, and so did Chibuzor, who stood nearby, watching silently. Kelechi held her breath, waiting for the mirror to reveal the monster hiding beneath Chibuzor's handsome face. But to her shock, the mirror reflected Chibuzor as a human. He looked perfect, just as he always did, charming, calm, and harmless. What is this, Kelechi? Kamsi asked, her voice sharp. What are you trying to do? Kelechi's face went pale. You're supposed to see the truth in the mirror, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know why it's not working. Kamsi's expression darkened. You are such an evil friend, she snapped. Because of your jealousy, you want to destroy my marriage. No, that's not it. Kelechi pleaded. I'm trying to protect you. But Kamsi wasn't listening. Her voice rose as she shouted, You're jealous of me. Just admit it, Kelechi. You've hated Chibuzor from the start, and now you're trying to ruin the happiest day of my life. Kelechi felt panic rising in her chest. She couldn't lose Kamsi, not like this. Desperate, she leaned in close and whispered into her friend's ear, I see ghosts. Please, don't tell anyone, but it's true. Chibuzor isn't what you think he is. Kamsi pulled back, her eyes wide with disbelief. Then, suddenly, she burst into laughter. Ghosts, she said loudly, her voice ringing through the room. Instead of telling me the truth, that you're jealous, you're making up nonsense about seeing ghosts? The room went silent for a moment, and then, one by one, people started laughing along with her. Kamsi's laughter grew louder, echoing in Kelechi's ears. Get out, Kelechi! Kamsi shouted, her voice full of anger and hurt. I don't want to see you at my wedding. You're a terrible friend. Kelechi's eyes burned with unshed tears. She looked around the room, hoping someone would defend her, but no one did. Her gaze landed on Chibuzor, who stood in the corner, watching the scene unfold. His lips curled into a slow, cruel smile, a silent reminder that he was winning. Kelechi turned and walked out of the house, her chest heavy with pain. She had tried everything she could, but nothing worked. The people she was trying to save had laughed at her and pushed her away. Inside, Kamsi continued her preparations, glowing with excitement for her big day. She didn't know that the man she was about to marry was planning her doom. Kelechi walked through the dark streets alone. Kelechi walked home with the thought of saving her friend out of her mind. As she opened the door to her room, she found Aylander waiting, her ghostly form glowing faintly in the dim light. How did it go? Aylander asked gently, though her expression already held the answer. Kelechi threw herself onto the bed, her voice sharp and bitter. I don't care anymore, she said. Let whatever happens to her happen. She doesn't want to listen to me. She looks at me like I'm the villain in her perfect love story. Aylander floated closer, her face firm but kind. You can't give up now, she said. If not for Kamsi's sake, then for the sake of the kingdom. It's not her fault. This is what the spirit does. It manipulates, twists, and blinds its victims. You know that. Kelechi sat up, her hands trembling. Why do I have to be the one to fix this? She shouted. Why do I have to fight for someone who doesn't even trust me anymore? Because it's your gift, Kelechi, Aylander replied, her voice steady. And with gifts come responsibility. If Kamsi falls, it won't just be her. It will be the entire kingdom. The spirits won't stop at her, they'll destroy everything. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the sound of Kelechi's uneven breathing. Finally, she looked up at Aylander, her eyes filled with reluctant determination. Fine, she said. I'll try. But I don't know where to start. Think, Aylander said. Do you know anyone old? Someone who might still remember the ancient ways? They might know about spirits like Chibuzur. Kelechi frowned, racking her brain. But no matter how hard she thought, no one came to mind. She sighed, frustrated. I don't know, she said. I can't think of anyone. The night passed in restless silence, and soon the sun rose. The day of the wedding had arrived. Kelechi sat by her window, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. Outside, the sounds of traditional music filled the air as the wedding festivities began. Drums beat rhythmically, and voices rose in joyous celebration. Yet, all Kelechi could feel was dread. Suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, a thought struck her. Grandma, she whispered to herself. Her grandmother, the oldest woman in the village, was still alive at 110 years old. If anyone knew about ancient spirits, it would be her. Without wasting another second, Kelechi grabbed her bag and ran. The sound of the wedding music faded behind her as she raced to her grandmother's house. The journey felt like it took forever, her heart pounding with urgency. When she arrived, she pushed open the door, breathless and sweating. To her shock, her grandmother was sitting upright, her old, wise eyes fixed on Kelechi as if she had been expecting her. I have been waiting for you, Spirit Seer, her grandmother said, her voice raspy but strong. Kelechi froze. Spirit Seer, she asked, her voice trembling. How did you know I could see ghosts? Her grandmother smiled faintly, her wrinkled face calm. This gift was not given to you by accident, she said. When a new heart carrying the key is born, a guardian is also born. You were chosen for this long before you even entered this world. Kelechi's legs felt weak, and she collapsed into a nearby chair. You mean you knew everything? All this time, she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Yes, my child, her grandmother said. That is why the gods have kept me alive for so long. I was waiting for this moment, though I didn't think it would take this long. Kelechi felt a lump in her throat. Then tell me, she said desperately. How do I save Kamsi? She's about to lose both her life and the key. Her grandmother reached under her bed and pulled out a small, old mirror. Take this, she said, handing it to Kelechi. Kelechi frowned, confused. I've already tried using a mirror, she said. It didn't work. Her grandmother shook her head. This is no ordinary mirror, she said. The spirits have learned to hide their true selves from regular mirrors. But this one, this was forged by our ancestors with powerful magic that no longer exists. It will show what other mirrors cannot. Kelechi stared at the mirror in her hands, its surface glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Go now, her grandmother said, her voice urgent. It's almost too late. As Kelechi stood to leave, her grandmother sank back into her chair, her breathing shallow. Grandma, are you okay? Kelechi asked, panic creeping into her voice. Her grandmother smiled peacefully. My mission is complete, she said softly. The gods kept me here to guide you. Now it's time for me to join my ancestors. Kelechi watched as her grandmother closed her eyes and took her final breath. A wave of grief washed over her, but she didn't have time to mourn. She clutched the mirror tightly and ran out the door, her feet pounding against the ground. The wedding music grew louder as she approached the venue. She ran with all her might, her heart pounding as she whispered to herself, "I will save you, Kamsi. I won't let you fall." Kelechi could hear the village priest's voice in the distance. It was loud and serious. "By the blessings of the gods, I unite you both in eternal love." Those words gave her chills. She struggled to breathe as she ran, holding the mirror tightly in her shaking hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks, blurring her vision, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The villagers turned to watch, puzzled by her sudden rush. Dust flew behind her quick steps. Whispers followed her. "Isn't that Kamsi's friend? What's wrong with her?" But Kelechi didn't hear them. Her heartbeat was too loud, and her thoughts raced faster than her feet. She reached the edge of the gathering just as the priest's voice rose again. "You may now kiss your bride." Kamsi's eyes closed, her face calm and trusting. Just then, Kamsi's eyes flew open, and time seemed to stop. Chibuzur's face changed, surprised, as Kamsi looked past him. Her breath caught. She was staring at something, or someone, behind him. Chibuzur turned, moving slowly, his smile fading. And there stood Kelechi, just a few feet away, holding the old mirror. The mirror glowed with a strange, pulsing light as it reflected Chibuzur. It showed his true self. The image was terrifying. His skin was pale and stretched tightly over his bones. His eyes were black pits that seemed to swallow all light. His teeth were sharp and too big for his mouth, and his hands were like claws, covered in rotting flesh. The mirror didn't just show Chibuzur, it revealed the evil hidden within him, the centuries of darkness he carried. Kamsi gasped and stumbled back. Her hands covered her mouth, and she let out a shaky scream. What is that?" she cried, her voice cracking. "What are you?" The light from the mirror grew brighter, showing even more horrors. Chibuzur's so-called family, who had seemed warm and perfect, now appeared as ghosts. Their eyes were empty, and their bodies were see-through. They looked like shadows of who they pretended to be. Fear spread through the crowd. The happy gathering turned into chaos. People pointed, screamed, and moved away from the strange figures. "They're ghosts," someone yelled. "Run!" Chibuzur staggered, his calm act completely gone. His black eyes darted between Kamsi, the mirror, and Kelechi. "You," he growled, his voice sounding inhuman. "You've ruined everything." The light from the mirror grew stronger. Chibuzur let out a deep, chilling roar as his body started to change. His claws slashed at the air. The same thing was happening to the ghosts around him. The bodies they had stolen, the recently dead ones they had hidden in, began to fall apart. They crumbled into ash, and the air filled with wails as the spirits were pulled back to the world of the dead. "No!" Chibuzur screamed, his voice echoing unnaturally. He reached for Kamsi, his decayed hand almost touching her face. But before he could, the mirror's light flashed one final time, covering him completely. And then he was gone. The village grew quiet. Only the sound of the wind moving through the trees could be heard. The glow from the mirror faded, and Kelechi lowered it, her hands still shaking. She looked at Kamsi, who stood frozen, her face pale. I didn't know," Kamsi whispered, her voice barely there. Tears filled her eyes as she moved closer to Kelechi. "I'm so sorry. I didn't listen to you. I didn't believe you. Can you ever forgive me?" Kelechi's heart ached. She saw her best friend, broken and sorry. She stepped forward and hugged Kamsi. "I forgive you," she said softly. "I'm just glad you're safe." The villagers stood quietly, their minds trying to understand what they had seen. Slowly, they began to leave, one by one, until only Kelechi and Kamsi remained. Together, Kelechi and Kamsi searched for Alander's body. It took time, but they found it, hidden and forgotten, decayed over the years. They dug a grave under a large tree, its wide branches spreading out like a shield. As they placed the last bit of soil over the grave, Alander's spirit appeared. She glowed softly, her face peaceful. She smiled at Kelechi, her eyes wet with thanks. "Thank you," Alander said. "I can finally rest." Tears ran down Kelechi's face as she nodded. "Goodbye, Alander," she said. "Thank you for everything." Alander's spirit began to fade, her light mixing with the sky. And then she was gone. Their friendship, tested by the darkness, had grown even stronger. Kamsi glanced at Kelechi and smiled gently. "You saved me," she said. "You saved all of us." True friendship means standing by those you care about, even when they don't understand your intentions. Kelechi's courage and determination remind us that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Protecting what's good and pure often requires sacrifice, but it can save more than just a single life. It can save an entire world. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Let us know your favorite part and what lessons you've learned. And for more captivating tales, subscribe to stay updated on the next adventure.